Hello friends, welcome to my channel. Today's video is one of the most shocking videos in the world. I have recovered everything from his childhood, his adolescence, and his final years in this video, and the sacrifices he made in life, his birthplace, his family and loved ones, and many other things are made as clear as water, which you never knew before. So it's not too late, let's listen. Before he wore white robes, before he stood on the balcony in Rome, before the world knew his name, he was just a boy, a quiet boy from Buenos Aires. He walked the same streets as workers, students, and shopkeepers. He took the bus. He played football. He prayed in silence. And one day, he heard a voice, not loud, not outside, but inside, a voice that said, "Serve." This is the story of that boy, the story of the man he became, a man who chose humility over power and hope over fear. This is the story of Pope Francis and the life he gave to love. Chapter 1. A boy from Buenos Aires. The streets were full of life, cars, buses, voices, music. It was Buenos Aires, a loud, colorful city in Argentina, and in the middle of it, on a simple street, a baby boy was born, Jorge Mario Bergoglio. The year was 1936. His family was not rich, but they were full of love. His father worked on trains. His mother stayed home to care for the children, 5 of them. Jorge was the oldest son. As a child, Jorge liked simple things. He played football in the street. He read books in quiet corners. He listened to his grandmother's stories. And he went to church often, not because someone made him, but because something inside him wanted to be there. He sat in the back, still, watching the candles, listening to the priest's voice, feeling something he couldn't explain. He didn't talk much. He was shy, but he noticed everything. He cared. When Jorge was a teenager, he had dreams like other boys. He thought about becoming a doctor, maybe a teacher, maybe even falling in love. But slowly, something else began to grow inside him. A quiet voice, a soft pull. He couldn't see it, but he could feel it, like a wind, moving him in a different direction. Sometimes at night, he lay awake and asked himself, "Why do I feel different?" And one day, he found the answer. He went to church for confession, to speak with a priest, to tell his thoughts, his sins, his worries. And after he spoke, there was silence. The priest looked at him with calm eyes and said nothing. But in that silence, something happened. Jorge felt it, clear, deep, strong. He said in his heart, "I want to serve. Not to be famous, not to be powerful, but to give his life to God." That moment changed his future. He didn't run home and tell everyone. He didn't shout it in the street. He just began walking in a new direction. He read more. He prayed more. He asked questions about faith, about life, about God. His friends didn't always understand, but Jorge didn't mind. He said, "If you feel called, you must follow." And that's what he did. He joined a seminary. He studied hard. He woke up early. He lived simply. His heart was full of questions, but also full of peace. He wasn't perfect. He made mistakes, but he kept going, because deep down he knew this was his path, a path of service, of sacrifice, of something bigger than himself. And so, the boy from Buenos Aires, the boy with old shoes and quiet eyes, began a journey that would take him far from home, but never far from the people, because from the very beginning, he didn't want to rise above. He wanted to walk with Anne. That small moment in that little church became the first step on a path that would change the world. Chapter 2. The Call of the Cross. He was still young, but he knew. Jorge felt something deep inside. A voice, a pull, like a quiet fire in his heart. He looked around at the world, so full of pain, noise, power, pride. And he thought, I want to live differently. So he made a choice, a serious one. He joined the Jesuits, a special group in the Catholic Church. Men who live with discipline, who study hard, and who serve the poor. It was not a normal life. No money, no family, no big dreams. Just service, just God. He gave up many things to find one true thing. But this path was not easy. Soon after joining, Jorge got very sick. He had a serious infection in his lungs. He could not breathe well. He had to go to the hospital. Doctors said, we must remove part of your lung. He was in pain, weak, tired. But he did not complain. He prayed, he waited, he healed. Later, he said, illness taught me to be patient, to listen, to trust. He almost lost his life, but he found his strength. Years passed. Jorge studied philosophy, theology, and history. He read late into the night. He taught others by day. And he listened. He always listened. To the stories of poor people, to the silence of prayer, to the cry of those no one else heard. Slowly, he became a leader, a guide. People trusted him. He became a priest, then a teacher, then a bishop. But he stayed the same man, humble, quiet, and kind. He didn't like big cars or special clothes. He wore black, simple shoes. He took the city bus. He walked through the streets. He visited the sick. He sat with prisoners. He blessed children in the poorest neighborhoods. He didn't need a microphone to speak. His eyes spoke. His hands spoke. His heart spoke. In every face, he looked for one thing. And he saw it again and again. Jesus, in the poor, in the broken, in the lost. God is here, he said, with the people, not above them, with them. Some people didn't understand. They said, why spend time with the poor? They cannot help you. But Jorge answered, they already helped me. They teach me love. To him, faith was not just prayer or church. Faith was action. When someone was hungry, he gave them food. When someone was lonely, he gave them time. When someone made a mistake, he offered mercy. He spoke softly, but people listened, because his words came from his life, not from a book, from the street, from the heart. One day a man asked him, why do you do all this? Jorge smiled and said, because this is the way of the cross. That man didn't understand, but Jorge did. He knew the cross was not only pain, it was also love, not only death, but life, not only hard, but holy. And that's the path he chose, the path of service, the path of truth, the path of hope, the path of the cross. Chapter 3. The day white smoke rose. It was a cold day in Rome. March 13th, 2013. The sky was grey. The people stood waiting. All eyes were on the chimney. The world held its breath. Would it be white? Would it be black? Then it came. White smoke. The crowd began to cheer. A new pope had been chosen. But who? Inside the Sistine Chapel, the cardinals had voted, again and again. And finally, they agreed. A quiet man from Argentina. A Jesuit. A man who had never wanted power. But the church needed something new, and they said his name, Jorge Mario Bergoglio. Many people had never heard of him. But soon, they would never forget him. The crowd waited in the cold. The bells rang. The balcony doors opened. Then, a man in white stepped out. He looked simple, calm, tired, but gentle. He raised his hand, and then he did something no pope had done before. He bowed. He said, "Brothers and sisters, good evening." His voice was soft, his face peaceful. And then he asked for something rare. "Before I bless you, I ask you to pray for me." Silence. Then thousands bowed their heads. He had chosen a name, Francis. Not a usual name for a pope, but it meant something. Saint Francis of Assisi was a man of peace, a man of the poor, a man who loved animals, nature, and the simple life. That choice said everything. This new pope wanted a church that walks with the people, not above them, with them. The world began to learn more about this man. He had lived in a small apartment, cooked his own meals, took the bus to work, lived near the poor. He had visited people in hospitals, in prisons, in the streets. And now he was pope. He didn't want gold rings or rich robes. He wanted kindness, mercy, simplicity. People began to call him something special. The people's pope. Some were surprised. Can a man like this really lead the church? But others saw something powerful. Not in his size, not in his voice, but in his heart. He wasn't loud, but he was clear. He wasn't perfect, but he was honest. He wasn't a ruler, he was a shepherd. And for many, he gave hope. Hope that faith could still mean love. Hope that leaders could still be humble. Hope that change was possible. That day, March 13th, 2013, something shifted. It wasn't just a new pope. It was a new feeling. A feeling that the church could open its arms again, that it could listen, help, heal. And it started with a simple man who bowed his head and whispered, "Pray for me." Chapter 4. Shoes of the Fisherman. They gave him keys to the palace. He didn't use them. They offered gold rings, red shoes, and silk robes. He said no. He chose simple white clothes, old black shoes, and a small room with a wooden bed. This was Pope Francis, the most powerful man in the Catholic Church. But he lived like the poor. He carried his own bag. He made his own phone calls. He ate lunch with workers in the Vatican kitchen. When reporters asked, "Why don't you live in the palace?" he answered, "Because I want to be close to the people." He never wanted to sit high above. He wanted to walk beside me. That's why they called him the People's Pope. But his message, it was not small. It was big, bold, clear. He said, "Care for the poor, protect the earth, open your hearts to those in need." He didn't just speak these words, he lived with them. He hugged the sick. He visited children with cancer. He washed the feet of prisoners, men and women, Muslims and Christians. One man cried and said, "Why would the Pope wash my feet?" Pope Francis looked him in the eye and whispered, "Because we are all brothers." He traveled the world, not for power, but for peace. He went to refugee camps. He kissed babies in war zones. He stood at the graves of forgotten people. He cried with mothers who had lost their children. He prayed with leaders who once were enemies. Wherever he went, he brought a message. Love is stronger than fear. But not everyone liked this Pope. Some said he was changing too much. Some said he talked too much about the poor, the planet, the people. They said he should speak more about rules. But Pope Francis kept going. He said, "A church without love is just a museum. A church must be like a field hospital where the wounded can come and heal." He spoke not to please, but to lead. Not with power, but with truth. He met world leaders, presidents, even kings. But he also met farmers, janitors, and street children. To him, they were all the same, all human, all holy. He said, God does not see from above. God walks with us. And every time he put on his old black shoes, he remembered that. He remembered St. Peter, the first pope, a fisherman, a simple man with dusty feet. And so, Pope Francis followed that path. Not in red shoes, but in the shoes of the fisherman. Some days were heavy. Some words made people angry. Some stories broke his heart. But he never stopped. He walked forward, slowly, quietly, faithfully, with hope, with courage, with humility. Because in every poor child, every sick woman, every lost man, he saw the face of Jesus. And in the end, that was enough. Chapter 5, Storms in the Church. Not all was calm. Not all was easy. Even popes faced storms, and Pope Francis walked straight into them. He wanted to open the windows of the church, let in light, let in air, let in the voices of the people. But some inside didn't want change. They wanted silence. They wanted comfort. They wanted control. Some whispered, "He is too modern." Others shouted, "He is not doing enough." And in the middle of it all stood one man, with a cross around his neck, and truth in his heart. Scandals came to the surface, painful ones, shocking ones, stories of abuse, of cover-ups, of broken trust. The world asked, where was the church? Where was justice? People were angry. Some lost faith. Some walked away. And Pope Francis, he listened. He didn't hide. He didn't deny. He said, we failed. Failed. We must ask for forgiveness. We must change. But change is not simple. It hurts. It divides. It takes time. He tried to clean what was hidden, to fix what was broken, to heal what was wounded. But it wasn't just one problem. It was many, old, deep, heavy. Some priests supported him, others fought him. Some smiled in public, but pushed back in secret. Still, he kept going. He spoke of mercy, but also the truth. He spoke of love, but also justice. He said, truth is not afraid. Mercy is stronger. He reminded people that the church is not made of stone. It is made of people, and people must grow, must repent, must become better. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't strike with anger. He walked with pain, but he walked forward. He invited women to speak. He welcomed questions. He opened doors for those once pushed out. He said, the church is a mother, not a judge. That upset some, but it comforted many more. And always, he remembered one thing. Jesus stood with the broken, with the poor, with the sinner. Not the perfect, not the powerful, not the proud. In the night, he often prayed alone. No cameras, no crowd, just silence and God. And sometimes he wept. For the victims, for the church, for the pain he could not take away. But he never gave up. He said, even when the boat shakes, we must not leave it. He stayed, not to keep power, but to serve. It was not easy. It was not popular, but it was right. He didn't fix everything. No one can. But he brought light into dark corners. He asked hard questions. He told hard truths. He didn't run from the storm. He stood in it with open eyes and an open heart, because for Pope Francis, faith was not a safe place. It was a brave one. Chapter 6. The Last Journey. He walked slower now. His steps are gentle. His voice is quiet, but still full of meaning. His body grew tired, but his eyes are still full of light. Pope Francis was getting older, and the world could feel it. He didn't travel as much anymore, but people still came to see him. Leaders, pilgrims, children, poor and rich, young and old, they came to listen, to say thank you, to hold his hand, even just for a moment. And he smiled, always smiled. He still spoke about the same things: peace, kindness, justice, mercy. He said, care for the earth, care for the poor, care for each other. Simple words, but full of power. In private, he prayed often. He looked out the window at the trees. He read letters from strangers. He spoke with love. He forgave. He was blessed. He told his close friends, I have tried. I have made mistakes, but I have loved it. And they believed him, because he had lived his message. Not just spoken it, lived it. The world changed during his time. Wars came and went, storms, disasters, violence, but also hope, because one voice stayed steady. One voice kept saying, do not be afraid of love. Even his enemies listened. Even those who once disagreed came to meet him, not for politics, not for power, but because they saw something in him, something true. Then came 2025, a quiet morning, cool air, soft bells in the distance. The Vatican announced Pope Francis has passed away peacefully in his sleep. The world stopped. Tears, silence, prayers, from churches in small villages to big cities, to the hearts of people who had never stepped inside a church. The feeling was the same: gratitude. There was no golden crown, no long parade, just candles and stories and songs. People remembered his laugh, his shoes, his words. They remembered how he made the poor feel seen, how he kissed the sick, how he bowed to the crowd on his first night as Pope. He left no money, no palace, no throne, but he left something greater, a legacy of love, of courage, of truth. He showed the world that faith could be gentle and still be strong, that a leader could be humble and still be brave. He reminded us that greatness is not in gold, but in kindness. And even though his voice is now silent, his message still speaks, in every act of care, in every step toward peace, in every hand held out to help another. His journey had ended, but his story had just begun.